So I'm going to Disneyland in about a month, and since I wasn't familiar with all of Pixar's canon, for reasons that will become clear in just about 35 seconds, and because I knew that Disney was all Pixar Fest, Pixar Fest, Pixar Fest, and because I like references, I decided to catch up on several of, if not all, of the Pixar movies that I'd missed over the past 15 years. And you know what? I'm not the first person to say this, but you know what? Pixar movies are full of dudes. Like, okay, so Ratatouille, which I really enjoyed, but also Rat's a dude, Rat's friend's a dude, Rat's brother's a dude, Rat's father's a dude, all the rats are dudes. There's one woman. She has this lovely little speech where she actually explains why she's the only woman in the movie, but then, she gets to fall in love with the dude. So I want to talk about Muppet Babies. And I know I made a bit of a jump there. But this is not what animation taught me last week. This is what lessons we learned from animation as children, and that means I have to talk about Muppet Babies because it was, if not the very first, one of the first animated anythings that I was ever exposed to. So, what do we know about Muppet Babies? Well, one, they make their dreams come true, and two, they're mostly dudes. There's, Fozzie, and Kermit, and Gonzo, and Rolf, and Scooter, and Bunsen, and Beaker, and Animal. And then there are, then on the not dudes spectrum, there is Piggy, Skeeter, and Nanny. Okay, so Nanny, first of all, we're going to remove her from the picture because as a child, you're probably not going to identify with Nanny. You're probably not going to look at Nanny and think, I have the same feelings and life goals as she does. Also, she's in 10 seconds of every single Muppet Babies, which I rewatched, by the way. They're on YouTube, but they're very poor quality, which is one of the reasons why you're not going to see me splicing in the footage here. The other reason is that I don't know how to do that. But back to Piggy and Skeeter. All right, so when you're a little older, when you're in college, you're going to learn about the, quote, Madonna whore, quote, treatment of women in media, but Muppet Babies is a little too young for that. So they have the girly girl and the tomboy. And this actually comes up in a lot of animation, which I started to realize as I got a bit older. I was watching Camp Candy, and I'm like, oh, there's a Piggy and a Skeeter in this thing, and then you start watching some other things, and you're like, oh, there's the super girly girl, and then there's the tomboy girl. And the girly girl is getting chased by all the dudes in the comic, and the tomboy is one of them, but she's got longer hair. Anyway, so back to Muppet Babies. Muppet Babies always made me sad as a kid. It is a sad show, actually. It's kind of like Peanuts in that it's consistently about the tragedies of childhood. Do you remember that episode where all the Muppet Babies get cookies with their faces on them except Rolf's gets left in the kitchen by mistake, and Rolf thinks that Nanny doesn't love him, and he is just devastated, and you're watching that, and you're identifying with Rolf regardless of gender, I'm assuming, because like Rolf, you have felt left out, I remember when a teacher forgot to give me a thing that she gave everyone else in the class, and I'm sitting there, and it's first grade, and everyone else has this thing, and I'm just like, my thing. Why don't I have this thing? And so I'm thinking and feeling these things that Rolf is feeling, because that's what Muppet Babies are about. Muppet Babies is about being misunderstood. It's about worrying about being abandoned. I told you, I just rewatched a bunch of these yesterday. It's, it's about all of these things that children go through. And so I'm watching this, and Muppet Babies always made me sad. But it also made me sad because all the characters hate Piggy. And as a young girl, very young girl, who was a little bossy, we're going to get to that, very fastidious, and who loved dresses and pink, I identified with Peggy so hard, and everyone hated her. They don't actively hate her, they don't, but they do, They're consistently telling her that her skills are not worth anything. When you rewatch it, which is something I didn't quite pick up on as a child, there are actually three central characters. There's Piggy, Kermit, and Gonzo. Kermit is the leader. Piggy is the manager, which is a distinctly female role. As you might remember from that comic about the mental load, have you read that comic about the mental load? Kermit is the one telling the Muppet Babies what they should do next, and Piggy is the one organizing it all. And then all the other Muppet Babies mess it up, because imagination means just chaos and whatever. And then Piggy gets mad, and then they get mad at her. And Gonzo's the weirdo. We're going to get to Gonzo's role in this whole thing in just a sec, but... So, here I am as an older sibling who is often responsible for managing much in the way that Piggy is, especially because during that era, and I swear I'm remembering this correctly, even as like a kindergartner age child, we got to play in our rooms, and our parents / nanny were not in that room with us necessarily. We could go visit them, but I remember a lot of times with my sister in a room by ourselves, just like the Muppet Babies. And, you know, someone's got to do the minding, right? Someone's got to do the managing. Someone's got to do the organizing. If we're going to play a game, someone has to say, okay, let's get the things out and set up the game. And Piggy does all this in the Muppet Babies, and the Muppet Babies hate her for it. And yes, Piggy is bossy. And yes, she's controlling. And, you know, these are the strengths, weaknesses, same side of the coin. And yes, she is the only Muppet Baby who is girly. She is the one in the dress, you know. I mean, Skeeter has her, you know, Soup's shorts and t-shirt, and she's like, I like exercising, I like sports, you know. And then Nanny has a dress on. As far as you can tell, you only really see the bottom third of her butt. She has sneakers, which sort of undercuts the whole. I mean, Piggy has gloves. She is wearing gloves in the nursery to protect her hands from the elements, you know. But, and I loved wearing dresses, and I understood that on some level that was a bad thing. It was weird. It was a thing that I wanted, but it was also a bad thing, because here was this character whom I identified with, and all the other Muppet Babies were like, bleh, you know, you're not one of us. So, back to Gonzo. There's an interesting love triangle in Muppet Babies. It's very odd because these are babies. It's also odd because the people watching them are slightly older than babies. You know, we are preschoolers and kindergartners and maybe first graders, but probably by then we've moved on to something else. So here we are watching Muppet Babies, and there's this love triangle. On the one hand, you have Piggy and Kermit, who are sort of established as endgame. Like, if you've seen the Muppets Take Manhattan, and I had by that age, you know they get married. And so I guess it's just sort of normal to assume they have a relationship, even though they're babies. But the series plays it as if they sort of do. Now, interestingly, in this relationship, they fall into the sort of tropey roles of Piggy being the overbearing female half of the relationship, and Kermit being the somewhat lazy boyfriend. Oh yeah. Kermit is not really interested in being, well, no. It seems like he's sort of interested in being Piggy's boyfriend, even though he's a baby. But he's not interested in, like, doing the work of the boyfriend thing. And there are some moments in this series, if you go rewatch it on YouTube, where it's obvious that Piggy thinks, oh, this is the thing that Kermit and I will do together because we're together. And then Kermit's like, what? I'm doing my own thing over here. I'm not thinking about you at all. And that's a relationship trope that is sort of based in reality, because I have seen it played out more than once in my own life. I tell you, Piggy, me and you. And who knows why the people who wrote Muppet Babies, whose names I did not look up and will not tell you, decided to include that trope in the cartoon for children. But there it is. Now, meanwhile, we've got Gonzo, the weirdo, the wild card, the actual comic relief, because Fozzie's role is to not be funny. But Gonzo loves Piggy. This is, I guess, his pre-Camilla era. So Gonzo, in all of these episodes, is chasing Piggy. And he is borderline sexually harassing Piggy, except it's not sex, because babies. There's this one episode, the Muppet Museum of Art, in which Piggy lies about leaving a skate out. And she tells everyone it's Gonzo's skate instead. And after some telltale heartish stuff, it comes out that she confesses, you know, and she can't stand the guilt anymore. And then Gonzo says he will forgive her if she kisses his nose. This is, by the way, after he has spent the entire Muppet Museum of Art trying to draw her because he loves her, which he freely admits is part of the story for babies. It's part of the story. And at the end, he's like, I'll forgive you if you kiss my nose. And she's like, butts. But she doesn't. So this sort of thing happens in multiple episodes, you know. Gonzo is consistently telling Piggy that she needs to have a relationship with him because that's what he wants. Now, meanwhile, Piggy thinks she's in a relationship with Kermit, but Kermit sort of doesn't want to be there, which again is a really weird thing to include in a show for children. But so, what did Muppet Babies teach me? I mean, I think it taught me to feel bad about myself. I don't know. I always knew I was a Piggy type. For both the good and the bad reasons. You know, again, I'm a good manager. I am a low controller. I am fastidious. I'm also a little, prissy? Can I use that word? What's the word for being, sort of particular about everything and also feminine? Yeah. And, you know, I wanted love from people, not in the way that, you know, again, I was a kindergartner, but, you know, I understood that at some point I would want love from someone like Kermit, or at least I assumed I would because that was what animation was teaching me, and I'd have to sort of badger a frog into loving me. Wow. Wow. Yeah. So, I'm going to end with this. I'm going to say, thank goodness Muppet Babies were not my only influence as a child. I was, and my mother, I think, helped with this, chock full of female characters as a kid. We had not only Miss Mary Poppins, whose necklace I'm proudly wearing today, but we also had, you know, like half the Von Trapp children. We had, you know, half the Pevensey children, like Susan and Lucy, going to Narnia. They're the main characters in that story. We had, you know, Mary Lennox and Sarah Crew and Heidi, and then Clara, and then the other Clara from the Nutcracker, and Dorothy, right? And the Ingalls family, lots of girls there. And even though these girls were sort of all in the past, and most of the cartoons I was watching that had only one, if not zero, female characters were set in the present, and so I sort of had this weird desire to live in the sort of Victorian and Edwardian era, because that was where all the girls who seemed like me lived. I still had plenty of strong female role models as a young child, which was great. But then you turn on Saturday morning cartoons and it's like Ninja Turtles. It's like Garfield and Friends. How many of us pretended that Nermal was a girl? It was sort of like Camp Candy. It was like Marsupilami and he's running through the jungle. It was all this stuff that didn't have me in it. And when it did, it was a character that nobody liked. That's the end of my vlog. Thank you for